Yes.
I just want to add a comment to here. We can tie in the energy problems we have in the state or the paradigm shift we need to have in energy, and how the federal government can help. We can have an investment to come into the state of Michigan and to attract the presence of a large wind manufacturing corporation to create the infrastructure. I mean, one can say practically overnight here in our state. Camisa came from Spain several times to Grand Rapids, but there's no investments to attract them to create such infrastructure, which would create jobs and help the tax system for the universities.
Well, by the way, I want to apologize for calling Paul Brad. It's an Isley Brothers thing.
Yeah. I can see where the resemblance would be there.
Okay, Mark. All right, Mark Brewer.
But one thing I'd add to this discussion, rather than a helicopter drop, it would be good if the federal government, as a first step, would fund its mandates on all states, not the state of Michigan. We're talking about No Child Left Behind, which Bush has never fully funded. There are a number of other laws relating to students with disabilities, for example, which have been imposed on the states that have never.
Well, as Senator McCain likes to say, the Bush administration is ancient history. If your predictions come true, in January, we have a Democratic president, large Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress, which I think everybody concedes, and the state of Michigan is going to be running a huge budget deficit. What are you going to do for us?
Well, that's just exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I think these educational mandates, there are other things that can be done. We've been talking about student aid. We've seen reductions in Pell Grants and other kinds of student programs to aid students in terms of these terrible tuition costs. I think those are the kinds of things that need to be restored. But we're going to have to try to find the money to pay for them.
Senator Schwartz, you know better than anyone that when the state tends to run last-minute budget deficits, they tend to cut higher education, because that's the easiest, low-hanging fruit.
Well, they didn't when I was in the legislature, but they do it now.
It's your fault for leaving.
It is. Yes. No, it's their fault.
That's right. For imposing term limits on the legislature. How are we going to avoid that in coming years, given what we know now about the shape of the economy?
You're not going to be able to avoid it. You know, unfortunately, and I think I pretty much said that. And if we don't, and as Professor Isaac said, you know, the structural deficit is just, and we've had it for years and years and years. It's been pointed out for years and years and years. It continues to get worse.
By structural deficit, you mean the budget process is programmed to throw up a deficit?
No, well, yes, that's one way to put it. Structural deficit, I mean, we know, we have an idea what revenues are going to be, and we have an idea what revenues are going to be out 5, 6, 7 years. Yet we keep spending far above those revenues, and the lines keep diverging, and they'll continue to do that. If we don't attack it, it's going to be tough. I mean, we are going to have people get what we can from the feds. I agree with Mark on that. But there's going to have to be some sort of budget discipline in Lansing. And may I say, we're talking about bringing jobs to Michigan and making Michigan look like an attractive place to be in the 21st century for innovation. Proposal 2 is on the ballot, ladies and gentlemen, and there is a whole scientific community out there that would like to bring stem cell research to them. California, New York, Wisconsin, God knows where, Missouri, for God's sake, is better off than we are in that. So I implore you, please vote yes on Proposal 2. It will bring jobs.
It's the turn of the gentleman at this microphone.
Sure. Ooh. My question is actually shifting gears to energy, and this may be a generational question. What seems to come up in debates amongst folks in the young professionals age group, maybe up to 35 years of age, is we keep talking about nuclear energy and setting aside all the environmental impacts of nuclear energy. My question is a political one. How can we go on producing an energy when we police the world against using the same type of technology? Just curious what the parties have to say and how they differ on that answer in terms of.
So you're saying, how can we advocate more nuclear power plants When we are doing what in the world?
Well, when we're policing the world against having nuclear energy themselves. It seems to be more of a political statement. Just wondering, we seem to not be eating the same food that we're selling. So, it seems like we're saying one thing and doing another.
Okay, first of all, starting with Mark Brewer, do you accept, are we in fact telling other countries not to have nuclear energy?
As I understand it, again, I don't profess to be an expert in this, there are certain types of nuclear facilities that we oppose because...
The ones that make bombs.
Yes, because they can produce...
You don't like that, yeah.
They can produce so-called fissionable material.
Sure.
But there are other types of reactors, as I understand the technology, that does not produce such material. So I think that's the distinction that we draw in our international policy on this matter.
Let's go to Imad Mahawili. Is it easy to distinguish between the two types of nuclear energy?
The infrastructure is very hard to distinguish between them. Yes, the waste material they both fissionable material, and can, if it's not make a bomb, can make a dirty bomb, which is not a sort of not a critical nucleus. So I mean, no, it's hard to do. Yeah.
I guess my question would be irrelevant to whether or not. I guess maybe the question is twofold then. Even if it is fissionable material, we ourselves have bombs, so why? It seems like we're saying one thing and we're policing.
Well, that's a different question. A question
right,
about
so
bombs.
I'm keeping on energy. So I guess my question is, do the parties differ on? Because I see sort of a cohesion there.
And well, let me slightly reshape that. Senator Schwartz, your candidate has been much more outspoken about the need for more nuclear power plants than Senator Obama. Is this a case of us saying to the world, do as we say, not as we do?
I don't think it has to do with the fissionable products that are used for nuclear power itself. It has to do with what you do with the waste, because you can refine the waste into plutonium, and that's what we're concerned about. And that, in fact, is what's happening in North Korea, probably, and probably in Iran as well. And there are some nuclear powers that are not signatories to the nuclear to the Control Act. India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea are not, and we now have tried to cut a deal with India. And the big objection with India, of course, is we want to help you with your civil program of creating nuclear energy, but we're going to keep our hands off your military program. So yeah, what you're saying in some ways is correct, but I don't think it has anything to do with our ability to build plants for civilian usage to produce power. We do have good controls. We do have a good place to put the waste. If the Nevadans would just back off on Yucca Mountain, which will happen sometime in the 29th century. What we're talking about was civilian use of nuclear power in this country, and what the signatories believe in, and the non-signatories who I don't know that I would trust them as far as I can throw Mark here. So it's two different, or the table. It's two different problems, and that's
before we get into a nuclear.
One of the reasons I oppose the deal with India is that it leaves their military programs alone. And if we look the other way on that, I think we're doing the wrong thing. Doesn't have anything to do, I don't think, with building nuclear power plants in the U.S.
Mark, briefly.
Yeah, just in further response to the question, I think the difference between the two parties and the two candidates on nuclear energy is that while Barack Obama does not rule it out as an option, it's way down the list. It's not off the table, but it's certainly nowhere near the top in terms of priorities. I mean, we want to see things like the alternative energy development we talked about here tonight, and even much more emphasis on efficiency of energy use in this country before we put the kind of emphasis on nuclear energy that we've heard from Senator McCain.
This gentleman right here has been very patient.
First, I'd like to thank you all for coming to see us tonight. Michigan Radio, Jack Lessenberry, I've listened to you many times in my car. Along with that, I have two things. One of them isn't a question, I promise. The first one is, I think we need to give credit where credit is due. This governor's been a big proponent of the renewable portfolio standard, and we've talked a lot about that this evening, and she gets a lot of heat around here, and I'm happy to see that she's been on the front end of that. Now, one thing I'd like to hear from our economists and our environmentalists, how does the renewable portfolio standard affect us in this audience, and how will it affect us in our pocketbooks as well as jobs in the future?